Hi, I'm Cabaret singer Katie McGrath, and this is another edition of Offstage with Cabaret Katie. Scott Barberino, who's the publisher and editor-in-chief of Nightlife Exchange, suggested that I interview Peter Leavy, who's the publisher of Cabaret Scenes magazine. Now, I had no idea that I was in store for the kind of conversation one has when fortune assigns you a seat on a long flight next to a completely absorbing, captivating person who makes the trip just fly by. The word spry is often used to describe a person in his later years who is still physically active and in full possession of his faculties. But at age 90, Peter Leavy is much too young to be called spry. He can save that for another decade or so. For now, Peter Leavy is handsome, charming, courtly, and funny, all traits that no doubt facilitated a lifetime of doing things, as he says, by the seat of his pants. He calls it luck. I'd call it seizing the moment, or as Kurt Vonnegut said it better, by realizing that peculiar invitations are tap dancing lessons from God. Peter said yes to such invitations that included writing columns about a man's point of view for 17 magazine, at the ripe age of 19 years old himself, or editing several other publications and innovating manufacturing techniques for fabric, courting and marrying his beautiful wife, falling in love with the medium of cabaret, and he hasn't looked back. He visited our home recently, dogs and all, and had a free-flowing discussion with me about his life and work.
In my early days, when I was out of college, I was a Manhattanite and have been ever since, except recently when I'm out in California a lot. I saw all of the initial productions of Oklahoma, My Fair Lady, South Pacific, Annie Get Your Gun, Damn Yankees, and it was very easy because My Fair Lady opened on March 15th, I think it was 1956. The reviews were extravagant. That show sold out in about 8 minutes for 10 full months. But I saw it on April 15th, 1 month later. And then I saw it 3 more times in the next 5 or 6 months because you could get standing room for $2. And they only sold standing room the very same day. And so all I had to do was be at the box office by 10:30 in the morning, and I could see it. And
how long would you have to wait in line?
At 10:30 in the morning,
really?
Nobody was there. You walk in, if there was one person in front of you, there was one person. Standing room for tonight. And I became enthralled with all of these shows. And so whenever I hear music from those early shows, I just saw Kiss Me Kate. I love Kiss Me Kate. I saw My Fair Lady a month ago when I was here. I'm back and forth these days. And it's like reliving the first experience, except you know what's coming. I discovered something working in my brother-in-law's office that was fascinating. People with regular jobs had a life of their own after 6 o'clock. I would work, because I was still writing, I would work till 11:30 at night, and then call my poor girlfriend, who I lived at 10th and Bleecker. She was at Perry Street, about 5 blocks away. And the conversation would go like this: hello? And I would say, oh my God, Gene, I'm sorry, did I wait? What? Oh, Peter, no, I was reading. Oh, that's great. How would you like to go out and get something to eat? Sure, yeah, that would be great. And I would say, I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Oh, God.
And she said, could you make it 20? I want you to know, 25 years later, I dug up the connection to her and took her out to apologize for what I did 25 years earlier.
And did she remember
Oh, did
that
she ever?
time?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
was she harboring a resentment about it, or did she,
not at
was
all.
she delighted
No,
by it?
No, we had a good time
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Well, that poor thing.
Oh, but she had a ball. Do people like you're the publisher of Cabaret Scenes? Is that correct? Or the
Well, the magazine is a publication of what is now the American Songbook Association.
American Songbook
It's a
Association.
501c3, which is a nonprofit organization. And I got involved with that one also, like everything else, by accident. Cabaret was a relatively small community, and you see the same faces in the audience, and after 2 or 3 times you smile, and after 6 or 7 times you greet them with hi, and then after maybe 10 or 12 times you now engage them in a little conversation. And one of the people I got friendly with, because we kept seeing each other at cabaret shows, was a gentleman named Darrell Henline. And one night we were at the Russian Tea Room. They had a Sunday night series. Ann Hampton Calloway was performing for the first time with her sister Liz Calloway. And before the show began, Darrell Henline, who was sitting next to me on my right, leans over and he says, "You know, I'm starting a cabaret magazine." And I said, "Oh, that's funny. I used to edit 4 magazines when I was..." And he says, "You did?" He says, "I need you." And I said, "I don't do that anymore." And he said, "No, really, I need you." And I said, "No, really, I don't do that anymore." But I kept seeing him at least once or twice a week. And finally he said to me, "Would you do just 1 article for me?" "What kind?" He said, "Anything you like." And I said, "You mean like a profile about somebody?" He said, "That would be great." Yeah, I said, "But who?" And he said, "Anyone you like." Well, I was very fond of Eric Michael Gillette, who at the time was still the singing ringmaster at Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers. But on his nights off, he would do cabaret. So I met him to do the 1 article, and it's what I call the flypaper effect. I touched it, and then it stuck to me, and I couldn't let it go. And I never missed an issue after that. Now listen, when I took over the publication of the magazine, I was concerned about exposing the participants in cabaret to the public that they needed. And it was getting more and more vital for them. So the first thing I did was more than double the number of reviews we had. We have 31 stringers now around the world feeding us reviews as well as features. I doubled the number of pages. I went from black and white to color. And I lowered the cost of advertising in order to give it more accessibility
Right.
to the performers themselves.
And the clubs that are not getting
Clubs, I don't think in the 12 years I've been publishing, I don't think we've had in the entire 12 years more than 3 ads from a venue, with the exception of the Metropolitan Room, because I was a partner down in the Metropolitan Room, so we advertised.
Nice.
Yeah, and I can tell you why. The rooms, the beauty of cabaret is the intimacy.
Right.
And intimacy is another way of describing small audiences. And regrettably, it's hard to make a lot of money when your audience is 65 people, not 1,500. And so that was important to me. Give these, if you're Tony Bennett, maybe the newspaper or magazine will acknowledge your show or mention that you're coming. But if you're someone whose name doesn't have that kind of visibility, not interested. And so I tried to cover the area that I felt was more and more shrinking. Basically, it's interesting because I was the publisher. Every month we send out a list of the shows that are scheduled for New York. I'm talking about New York. And the writers write in with the shows that they would like to review. I never do that because I figure all of my writers are volunteers. And the least I can do as publisher is let them see the shows they would like to see. So I was, for many years, at the bottom of the totem pole. If I was going to a show, I would call Frank Dane, our editor, and I would say, is anybody reviewing whoever that night? And if he'd say, no, nobody, then I would review it. So I saw people I'd never heard of. And some of them were marvelous. And some of them were less than marvelous, but also acceptable. I am very content with performers who are okay. I glorify in being at someone's show I never knew of, never heard of, and discover they are really great performers, which is one reason I have the crusade, as you call it. And many people who are young, I remember seeing one I'd never heard of, and it was interesting. I called, I think it was Don Schaefer at the time, is a publicist, or was PR in Cabaret, and I said, I have to see the two shows, I don't know which one to see, or which one to, it's good. And he said, well, you know, the kid at Don't Tell Mama, you know, he's never had a show before. And I went there anyway. And the show was on Songs of World War II. Now, this is something back in the 90s, and the kid was maybe 20, 21, 22 years old, and he was really good. And I had to see him after the show. How did you get involved with Songs of World War II? And he said, you know, when I was in grade school, my grandmother used to drive me to and from school, and this is what she played on the radio and I fell in love with it. Wow. And so many performers have fallen in love with the music before their generation because they heard it here or there or whatever. I once was reviewing at the Algonquin a Broadway person who sang to the wall. And she was very good, but she sang to the wall, to the spotlight, as I put it. And she was there with her PR person, whom I knew. So at the end of the show, I said, look, tell her this is Cabaret. The performer's connection to the audience is critical. She never looked to see that there was anybody in the audience. It was always to the wall. So he nodded. I saw him maybe a week later, and I said, did you pass along the word? And he said, I did. She said, that's the way my fans like it. Oh. So sometimes you deal with ego. The reviews are not the assessment of a vocal coach. They're the review of someone who's in the audience. And I am reviewing as an audience member. And from that point of view, I sure could do a job as an audience member. And sometimes I would find areas of the show that I thought didn't work right. And as I tell my writers, we have 4 different audiences. The most avid of the 4 audiences to your review is the performer himself. He asks, you know, hey, Ma, what did you think?
I loved it.
Edgar, what a beautiful show.
I laughed, I cried.
If he asks his friend, you know, Tommy, what did you think? Oh, great show. If you ask the audience leaving, what did you what are they going to tell you? You know.
Yeah, it really wasn't my cup of
our
tea.
job is to do a really pleasant review and point out pleasantly the areas that we think could be improved, so that the performer, when he sees it, knows how someone in the audience viewed the show. And that's what we do.
Have you
Four
ever-
audiences. The first is the performer himself. The second are prospective cabaret
Right,
goers
right.
who don't know the person but now read the review and he sounds interesting. And so, having read the review, a couple of weeks, because cabaret is a destination, can say to husband or wife, hey, you know, why don't we go see him? I understand he does a nice whatever. And the third audience is the booking manager. Did I do a good job?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, was I smart? And the fourth audience, very important, booking managers around the country who don't get to New York, but are looking for something other than the same few faces from their local community.
Right.
And I had, I've been thanked because, among others, I've been thanked for a 3-week gig out in Las Vegas, where the performer told me, you were responsible for getting that. And I believe it only because the person in Las Vegas never saw him perform. Now,
yeah.
I'm sure that after they contacted him, he sent a promo kit with video
Well,
or
sure,
whatever.
but it's what is the thin edge of the wedge that's
you
going to
know,
get somebody
that's what I
involved.
like the magazine to do.
Yeah,
Spread the word.
yeah.
In my early days in cabaret, I never failed to look around an audience and see at least a couple or three faces of the performers themselves in the audience.
I told you I'm from St. Louis, and the St. Louis cabaret community is very, it really is a community. They love each other. They go to each other's shows. They talk about, you know, it's nice and I would say cozy instead of tight. And I was so surprised and delighted to find a similar thing here. That people care about each other. They
Cabaret.
want to be present for each other.
I think it's true universally.
Do ya?
The cabaret community is supportive.
There's a lot more to the story of Peter Leavy, and we agreed that this would be the first of a series of conversations with him about life, love, music, and the business of cabaret. And I hope we'll see you there. I'm Katie McGrath, and this has been Offstage with Cabaret Katie.